Hi friends, my name is Zakib and welcome back to my channel Developers Point. Today in this video we will be looking at adding a API controller to our project. तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं. Let's begin. So what we are going to take a look at now is like adding our own API method or API controller. If we just go back and take a look at our controller, like we are having a controller here named as weather forecast controller. Here we can see that like the API controller has been already created with the default code. So like I'll be telling you what are the methods and the routes, like what are the attributes used here. And now if you take a look at a weather forecast controller one more time, then we are going to see some features that each API controller actually has. Here we can see something in the square brackets called an attribute, which is known as API controller attribute, and it defines that like the class of weather forecast controller is of API controller class. Now it signifies that the class is of API controller type. And not only that, there are certain things that are added to our controller. We'll talk about them shortly. And we won't worry about it for now, but we'll just add that because it is in this one, and then we'll take a look at what it does actually do. We also need a route for our API controller, and it defines like how the user is going to get the API controller from the client, and also a controller, let's say, derived from of a controller base. As you can see here we have a controller base which is derived from for the controller. And if you hover over the controller base, then it tells us what it does. A base class for an MVC controller without view support. So it tells us like the without a view support it creates a controller. So what we are going to do now is like I'm just going to close this tab and we will be going to our controllers folder. Here we will be creating a new class and I will be naming that class as users controller. So I will be keeping it users controller. So just keep an eye here, the C must be always capital. So I'll be just hitting on enter. Now the user controller class has been created. And the first thing what we'll be doing here is like we'll be deriving it from controller base. So I'll be writing controller base here. And what we'll be doing is like we'll be using quick fix for that, and here we can see using microsoft.asp.net core.mvc. So I'll be clicking on that. Now you can see that it has been fixed and there are no errors. Now here the MVC stands for old fashioned model view controller, and our controller is like a API controller which is a type of a controller. But in this case here the view is going to come from our client. We are going to be using the Angular to provide the view of our application, but MVC has been around for some time and that's the way of using .NET to serve the HTML pages. But in our case we will be using Angular. And what we are going to do next is like we need to provide some attributes to this controller. So for adding the attributes, what I'll be doing is like I'll be just going here and I'll be adding, first of all I will be making this controller as like API controller. So I'll be adding that. So now it defines that this particular controller is a method of API controller. And the next what we'll be adding, like we need to add the roots. So I'll be adding root, and here in the square brackets what we'll be doing is like we'll be passing a string. But in this case it's bit different now. It's different because like in the previous one it just given a controller name, like we just given provided a attribute called controller. But here what we are going to do is like we are going to start with API slash square brackets, then we will be passing the controller. So what the user will do in the browser, like to get to this controller, he need to just go with like API / control name. So here in our case the control name is users. So like he will be entering like API / users. Now here what we want our user controller to do is like actually get us some data from our database. And with this statement I am going to use that dependency injection one more time here. Now so for that what I'll be doing, like I'll be just going for a quick fix for the users controller. Here I'll be clicking, like I'll be pressing control period, and here we can see that we can have a constructor generated here. So we'll be generating a constructor for users controller and I'll be hitting on tab. Now you can see that like a constructor has been generated for this. And then what we are going to do is like we are going to pass the data context file here. So what I'll be doing is data context, and then I'll be naming it as here context. So here we can see a error, so I will be just going there and I will be pressing on control period, and I will be quick fixing it by using api.data. So now you can see that there are no errors here, and just make sure that this has been added in successfully, like here api.data. Now again what we will be doing is like again we will be using the quick fix to initialize the field from the parameter. So here we will be pressing the control period, then we can see a quick fix here saying that initialize a field from a parameter. Now in this class we have access to our database by just using underscore context. We can use this underscore context to like get the database access in any way in this whole class. Now what I'm going to do here is like I will be adding two endpoints here. The first one is like to get all the users from the database, and the second endpoint will be like to get a particular user from the database. So let's get started. And just as a weather forecast controller, what we'll be doing is like we will be using HTTP get because we are getting the data from this method. And then what we are going to do is like we will be saying this method as public, and we are going to return a method call of action result. So I'll be writing action, sorry for that, action result. And then we specify the type of thing that we are going to return inside the result that we send back to the client. And now in this case, like I will be returning a number of list of users, and there are several collections, and there are like number of collections inside .NET for returning list. But for here, like what I'm going to use is like enumerable of type app user, and then we are just going to call the method as get users and open up the curly braces. Now but the issue is here, like we are getting an error here for enumerable. Yes, we can see that the type or namespace of enumerable could not be found. Are you missing a using directory or assembly reference? Like yes, here we need to add some usings. So for that we will be going for again the quick fixes. For that we will be pressing control period, and here we can see that like using system.collection.generate to make use of enumerable. Like what we will be using is like system.collection.generic has been imported. So I will be clicking enter on that. Now you can see that the error has been fixed here, and we can also see error for app users. Then we need to get the app users reference for that, and we'll be again going for quick fixes, and we'll be adding api.entities. So it is also get fixed here, but the get users method does not get fixed because we need to return the result to this method. Now here the enumerable allows us to simple iteration over a collection of specified type. What we could have actually used is like we can also make use of a list here, and list will also do the same thing. It will return a list of users, but a list also offers methods to search, source and manipulate list, and it also offers too many features for what we are doing here. So that is what we don't want it to it here, and we just need a simple list which we can return to a client. So for that here what we'll be using is enumerable, which is a more appropriate type for our case. So that is the one I'll be using. So what we want to do in this method is like we want to just return a variable user which could return as a list of users to the client. So I'll be doing like var users, which is equal to underscore context dot users of dot to list. And here we can see a error again. But in order to use this list, what need to go is like we'll be going to a quick fixes, and we need to bring in using system.linkqueue. Now you can see that the error has been fixed. And then what we can do is like we can just return these users from to the endpoint. Now you can see that the error has been gone here too, as you are returning the list of users here to this action method of enumerables, and it fetches the users from here and shows on the client side. So it's just pretty simple. Now what we'll just do is like to be a bit of lazy, I'm just copy these methods, this method here, and I'll be just pasting it down there because those methods which are very similar. So I'll be just copying them and pasting them, and I'll be just changing some bit of attributes. So for this method, what we are going to do is like we'll be just passing a route to this method to specify that it's a different method which returns only a specific user. So for that what we'll be doing is like we'll be just adding a brackets, and then we'll be adding double quotes, then we'll be passing a route here, so flower braces, and then here we'll be saying as id. When the user is hitting this endpoint, what will be happening is like, I'll show you just here. Like the user will be hitting as endpoint like, or the URL such as API slash users slash one or two or like three. Then what will be happening is like, this method returns a specific user with the specific ID to the client. So what we need to do, one more method is like, we need to pass this ID as a parameter here in the get users. So what I'll be doing is like, I'll be just giving a data type as int, and like I'll be passing it as ID. Sorry guys, the zoom is too low, so I'll just zoom in here. I think now it's much more visible to you guys. And what I'm going to do, one more thing is like, it just written a single particular user, so I'm just gonna rename the method as from get users to get user. So here what this method is do, so here what this method is going to do is like, it takes a parameter of ID which is coming here from the root. And after coming to this case here, like instead of using user, so like I'll be using just user. And then what we are going to do is like, we will be using some different methods here from our context. So like what I'll be using is find of user, like with a specific ID we need to pass here. And now it's done. But here we are getting an error. You guys might thinking that like, here the variable is user and here we're returning users, but it's not the case. Okay, just let me remove the yes from here and I'll be checking it. But the error hasn't gone. We can just hover it and check what's the error. Cannot implicitly convert type API entities dot app user to Microsoft Entity Appco MVC action result. So in simple terms of word, like the error what it is saying is like, it cannot convert the app users to a type of collections. So for in this case, what I just need to do is like, I just need to remove the enumerable here and just pass the app users. Haha, that's it. Just as we have taught, like we have just fixed all the errors here. Now here in this method, we just don't need two different lines. Like we just don't need to declare a variable if you're doing nothing with that variable. So what we can do is like, we can just remove these users and we can just directly return this method. So what I'll be doing is like, I'll be just copying and pasting this line instead of user here. So like, it's a very simple method. We can just directly return the list or the user what we are fetching from that database, and it reduces our coding efforts. And we could do the same above as well here. If you're not going to use the variable users, then it's a best thing or a best practice to return the direct method. Now what we are going to do is like, we will just go to a browser here, and then here we are going to type http://localhost is to 5000, and we'll be hitting on enter. So here you can see that the site can't be reached. Oh, actually I forgot just to run this application. So I'll be just going to Visual Studio Code back, and here I'll be pressing Control apostrophe, and here in this terminal what we'll be typing is like, we'll be running this application. So what I just need to do is like, I just need to run the API project. So like, I'll be just going to the cd path of that API folder, and here I'll be writing .NET run. Then the application gets built, and now you can see here like, our application is now listening on http localhost 5000. So what I'll be doing is like, I'll be just clicking on this one of this method to go to that. Now again we can see this same page, localhost page could not, we just need to pass the root here. So like, I will be just going /API/users. Now you can see that a list of users has been returned which is present in our database. And if I specify /again 2 here for a single user, then it gives us a user with the ID number 2 here. So like, let's check it for other user, like a user number 5 or a user with ID number 5. So like, we'll be again hitting enter, then it gives us the data with the username having a user ID of 5. But using the browser is not the most efficient way of testing. things are working in our API, and one of the tool we installed earlier was Postman. And now let's go to Postman and take a look there. Here in the Postman, what we can do is like we are going to do it as the same way what we are going to do in our browser. But here we'll get the response back in a very easy or friendly way, which we can digest easier. So here now what I'm going to do is like I will be changing this. I'll be keeping this method to get, because it's a get method. So like I will be typing here http double equal to slash slash localhost 5000 slash API slash users, and I have hit on the enter button, and now as we can see here we have got a list of users which is present in our database. And what we are going to do next is like we will be checking whether the individual user or like it's working for that or not. So what I'll be doing is like I just want a single user here instead of a list of ID1. So like just for getting the Ben here, what I'll be just typing is like I'll be just adding /1. So like so that I could just only get the username of Ben here. So I am hitting on enter, and it shows us the username of Ben who is having ID of 1. And now let's just check it for 4 for your satisfaction. So I'll be just clicking on 4 here, and then here we can see that like username red has been appeared with a user ID of 4. So I think you may have noticed something wrong here. Not wrong, like something different. Here we can just notice like here the result has been written in commute case, because like here the I is small and U is small. Small means in lowercase, like it's in a lowercase here. And that's the most default convention that the most APIs do. And Microsoft follows that, because the JSON format code is typically a cameo case. So it's working. We can get our data from our database via our API controller, and we have got some relatively simple goals at this stage. At this stage is our working skeleton just requires us to see the end-to-end functionality, and we do have our users coming back into our client and our client Postman in this case. Obviously, like in the next video, we are going to take next step further and introduce Angular. But this is pretty good for what we are going so far. But for now, like in the next video, what we are going to take a look at, like we're going to take a look at asynchronous methods or asynchronous code, because what we are going to do is like it's saying asynchronous, and we'll take a look at async code next. Please like, share, comment and subscribe to my channel Developers Point. Thank you.